Welcome to another engaging edition of Hardfire TV. My name is Cameron Weber. Thank you for watching our program about civil and economic liberties. Today is our second program about government labor unions. Welcome back to Hardfire, Ron Litchman.
Good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Ron and I we talked about this topic about how Franklin Roosevelt was against the government labor unions during the New Deal, and then Ron is not just a pretty face. He also said, let's talk about New York specifically. And Ron's been living in New York since 1976. I've been living in New York since 2005. When we ended last time, we were discussing how powerful the unions are and how they are fighting civil service reform in Washington, D.C. Locally, we find that unions are the kingmakers when it comes to electing New York City's mayor. I'm putting up a graphic from the New York Post showing what's his name is back. The governor is not going to be the mayor, Mr. COVID lockdown himself. Great. And he's been anointed by the labor unions. From the Post March 12, 2025 article, we learn that New York and New York City is far more unionized than the nation as a whole. The unions become kingmakers both in New York City and in New York State. What do you think of that? What I think is some people complain about corporation money in the elections and the lack of democracy, but I see the lack of democracy when it becomes union power. What do you think of that, Ron?
Well, from the first principles,
Exactly.
a, a labor union is a special interest group. Its mission is to get more for its members and take from wherever it has to take. You
It's a pretty sick outlook, isn't it?
very seldom do we hear when a labor management negotiation is underway, even in the private sector, even more so, less we hear it in the public sector, where the union comes forward to the table and says, how can we make this company more profitable? Let's grow the pie. There'll be more for everybody.
Yeah.
Seldom hear that.
Yeah.
More, uh, more than not, you hear an increase in salary, increase in benefits, and an increase in work conditions, an increase in grievance procedures
Yeah.
that hamper management's management ability. And then the question becomes who's in control of this enterprise? Now, you
Wait,
apply,
Ron, you bring up a good point about the founding of the United States. I forget who said this, but uh, political parties will turn patriots into partisans. In other words, you become a partisan for the Union instead of a patriot for the United States and the everyone in the jurisdiction. Unions become partisans instead of patriots.
fair enough. I don't remember. It may have been Jeffersonian. Um, our founding fathers were insightful in lots of different ways, but there was a bit of a failure of imagination uh, over the uh,
General welfare clause.
advent of political parties and factions and
Well, yeah,
yeah,
you're talking about the Federalist Papers now.
right. There was a certain naivete amongst them.
Well, Ron, what I heard about the Federalist Papers is that these people were the Hamiltonians were saying, "Oh, you have to be wary of factions and all of that," when in fact they were just using that as what a false flag because they wanted to recreate the ruling class that England had.
There you have. So
And uh,
we're a very different country and very different society today.
so what I think is that public unions plus the Democrat Party, that's the statist oligopoly or the ruling class.
Well, as I pointed out, and harkening back to my libertarian roots, it does seem to me that big government makes big unions. I don't think it works much in reverse. If we didn't have big government, and we didn't have so many government employees, we wouldn't have such big government unions. And we have now in New York State.
Right, yeah, New York State.
New York State has a Taylor law.
We're the most unionized state and also the most taxed state. I'm putting up a couple graphics. Again,
Well,
we're the most unionized state and also the most taxed state. Thank you, Ron, for bringing that. And that's from the Empire, that
oh, but
Empire Research Group. That's a good research
yeah,
group.
well, I would call out to our readers to shout out or call out to the Empire Center.
Empire Center, yeah.
You can Google it. They have produced and promulgated a paper um, of scholarly content entitled "Tailor Made: A Pun on the Taylor Law."
Right.
The compromise in the Taylor Law was supposed to be that state and local employees are permitted to unionize, but they're not permitted to strike.
Taylor law specifically for New York City, which was passed
Well,
after a bunch of strikes in the 70s, right?
yes, and it's a statewide law, so it's applicable to New York as a state, not just in the city.
Okay.
It was it it was during the 1970s. There was the famous transit strike. The first day John Lindsay took office,
Yeah.
hobbled his administration
Yeah.
throughout.
You,
Uh,
you you were here then, right? Were you in law school then at the time or
I was not here. I think it might have been before law school.
okay.
I'm dating myself somewhat, but I think it
Uh,
was 1970, and I might have been a sophomore.
okay.
um,
Great.
but then there was a garbage strike. I remember a garbage strike, and and there have been a number of strikes. Now the strikes are illegal,
Yeah.
but there's been
They're
mo-
illegal under federal law, right?
as to under federal law, but I'll point out a distinction.
Yeah, that's what we're here
In
for.
in there needs to be a political will to enforce those laws.
Yeah.
And in New York State, oh well, some courts fined the unions, and some Michael Quinn, the transit union head, was put in jail for a little while, but it didn't have much deterrent effect.
Right.
Now, uh, Ronald Reagan had some deterrent effect. Air traffic
Interesting.
controllers went on strike.
Ah,
You don't show up in 2 days, you're fired. And they were fired. And that
right.
union, the air traffic controllers, PATCA, I think it was called.
The same thing's happening now, right?
It's not, it's almost happening now.
It's almost happened. It's
But
going through the court system now.
it,
Yeah, right.
but it requires a political will
Right.
on the part of high government officials to enforce the prohibition against strikes, to impose the penalties,
Yeah.
and uh, and produce going forward a credible deterrence. New
Right.
York State doesn't have that.
Yes, sir.
Fast forward to this last 6 months or so, when corrections officers of New York State prisons, of which I think there were 42, all walked off over some grievance
Uh-huh.
concerning a state statute contemplating restraints on solitary confinement in the prisons. The
Ah,
correction officers thought that was too generous or too liberal for the
right, right,
prisoners,
right,
and
right.
they opposed it, and they
Yeah.
went on strike.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
it may have been a plausible point or grievance on their part, but they
Uh-huh.
went on strike.
Yeah, yeah.
Ronald Reagan, when he was faced with a strike, fired them all.
Yes.
Kathy Hochul, when she's faced with a strike, decides, well, let's
There's
talk.
nothing.
Let's talk about it. Let's have a commission. Let's let's see
Yeah,
if we can reach some compromise on.
that's what economists do. Let's have a commission.
Yeah, well, and that does not deter
Well,
a, a union from
well, you bring up a good point,
violent.
Ron. I'm going to put up a graphic again. You can call me Mr. Graphics, audio visual here, what we're doing. uh, public sector strikes in New York and in the US, you can see that the New York public sector has more strikes than the rest of the nation. So there's got to be
It, it,
something about the Taylor law or the non-enforceability or the political will, like you said. New York just doesn't have the political will to enforce the law.
uh, that statistic doesn't surprise me. It's new to me, but
Yeah, that's from your Empire.
is it in the Empire paper?
Yeah, from the Empire paper that they got from annual report from the U.S. Department of Labor. So you
Yeah.
have to believe it. You have to believe
So
it.
doesn't surprise me. We in New York, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg circularity. New York has big government, so it has big unions.
Yeah.
And uh, when some years ago I was with, with the Libertarian Party trying to get
Right.
candidates elected,
You were the chair of the Manhattan Libertarian Party
I was for a couple of years,
in like 2015, 2016. When?
16 or 18. I think
Yeah.
my second year was over just about the time
Yeah.
Trump was elected the first time. It was 2016.
Okay.
Uh, I remember that night we were having one of our monthly libertarian uh,
Right.
chapter meetings on a Tuesday night in November, and I was about to close the meeting, and somebody had his laptop popped open and said, "But wait, election returns are coming in, and they're calling Florida for Trump." And at that time,
Ah.
everything changed.
And
But,
and
but
two
I
years
got
later, you have COVID, and everything changed again.
everything changed again, and we no longer had libertarian meetings because we couldn't get together.
Ah, and that's why we're doing this on Zoom instead of the TV studio
Right.
because we had yeah, things
But
change.
it does have its productivity. I'm in New York and you're in Texas, and
Yeah.
this
No, I'm
tech
in an undisclosed location.
undisclosed location. Well, then I let out your
Because I don't want to be stabbed in the back by the labor union leaders. No,
so
yeah,
I was looking, and I remember, sort of vaguely, take it impressionistically. There are 19 million New Yorkers, and maybe a third of them actually vote. Um, but across the state,
yeah,
if one adds up government, the direct government employees, and others that depend upon government in
yeah,
largesse,
very
uh,
much.
and you have a political force that is almost insurmountable.
It is.
You have government employees and those that depend upon government, a benefit or perceive that they do. They don't necessarily see that they're paying with out one end where they're getting from the other end, but that's an economics.
Hey, Ron, related to that is the United States has more people working for the public sector than China does per capita. In other words, we have more people working for the more government union members than China does per capita. So
Well, I
what does
would.
that mean? That we're more socialist, or what does that mean exactly?
Well, I don't know.
More statist? I don't know what it means. It means it's a political force that's unstoppable, kind of.
Well, but they don't have an elected Congress or elected legislature, and
Oh, that's great.
so
That's
they, so
It
they're
sounds like Hans Hermann Hoppe who said, "Oh, things were much better under the aristocracy." That's funny.
they, so they,
I wouldn't go that far.
even if China's public sector uh, workforce were unionized, they'd have no place to go. Who do ours
Well, they would go to jail. They would be killed if they struck, right? A little
or
bit,
something? I
something
I, I, sus-
disappeared.
I
They'd,
suspect
they'd be asked for tea. Would you like?
I suspect there's the political will to suppress an adversarial relationship against the government over there. So my
Yeah,
first principle is an organization of employees, a labor union, is inherently an adversary organization seeking more for its members from
that's
wherever it has to come. And
Well,
if,
in our last show, we learned that labor union members make 40% more than than the private sector. Salaries and benefits, government union members make 40% more when you look at benefits and salaries than the private sector. So they've done quite well for themselves.
well, then that is, in a way, our democracy at work. Because what has happened, is that a organized, politically savvy cohort of unionized government workers and and have learned and have perfected the art of electing their legislatures. So,
Yeah.
so
Well,
it,
yeah, that's the special interests win out over the everyone else. Yes,
right.
that's democracy.
So you come to a bargaining table, and the union is on one side, and De Blasio, the mayor of New York, is on the other side, or Hochul is on the other side.
Or
Or,
or the famous family who was on the other side,
yeah,
who's going to be the next mayor of this New York City.
have a bridge named after your father.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing.
And you
Didn't he leave in
it
disgrace?
ends
How
up
can he possibly come back as the mayor? I don't get it.
talk
You've
to
lived there longer than me.
the
We're
New York
talking
Post.
about New York.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, so a municipal labor union that can concentrate and focus its headcount
right.
and the family. And so somebody works for a labor union or is a teacher
Yeah.
and has a spouse and has children and has
They grow
relatives,
up that way. Exactly.
and they're and
It
they both
propagates.
and
Yeah.
if they can organize and focus like a magnifying glass
Yeah.
on a leaf, and you can they on a city council seat or mayoral election, they can leverage their political will to their to their advantage and inherently to the exclusion of others. So
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's the elephant in the room. The New York State United Teachers Union has 700,000 employees, has 700,000 members, right? The New York State Teachers Union has 700,000 members. That's almost as much as the U.S. government has unionized members.
right now,
Wow.
what would happen if, very hypothetical, if under these circumstances, if New York State eliminated, say, 200,000 teachers, or moved them to charter schools, which are non-unionized? Well,
Right.
then
Yeah,
that
public schools are the largest item in the New York City mayor's budget, about 40 billion or 34,000 per student, which is twice as much as the national average. New York, New York.
I
Yeah,
think that's as
yeah,
much. Isn't that as much as it costs to go to Harvard?
pretty much. And then according to the Taylor law, according to the Taylor law report you gave me from the Empire Center, union member teachers have contracts which grow teachers' salaries quicker than the economy. So I'm going to put up a graph to show how the teachers' salaries grow so much quicker than everyone else's salaries.
There are technical aspects of that, and one of them is
Yeah,
under this Taylor law and the regulations surrounding it or derived from it
yes, sir.
are the certain things are no longer negotiable. So
It's like
teachers,
on the waterfront come to life.
so yeah, so there's a bit of it seems to be sort of a stranglehold. So in a collective bargaining context, when the parties can't, when a contract runs out,
Ah,
the old contracts in step increases of salary levels persists.
so they have
So,
an incentive to let the contracts run out.
well, at least they have.
That's the point of the empire, right? Because of this arbitration.
Or
Yeah, so that the Taylor laws was actually more generous than the federal law. That
uh,
would explain the more strikes.
it could well be. And so even without a contract, compensation continues to go up.
Right.
One would think that without a contract, it might be frozen and there'd be some disincentive to dragging it out,
That's right.
disincentive not to renew a contract so your compensation increases can catch up or resume.
That's why you wanted to talk about the Taylor law specifically in New York
So
City,
that's one little function
New
of it.
York State. Yeah, yeah.
And I would strongly encourage interested viewers here to download that paper and take a good look at it.
Yeah, the
It
Empire State. And then you mentioned the current how the current governor of New York is kind of a pushover for unions. And then we talked about how the education teachers unions are such a special interest, cost twice as much, their salaries keep going up. And I'm going to put up a graphic that shows how the current governor of New York has just allowed, is not fighting for charter schools because of the strength of the teachers unions are not allowing the charter schools, even though the number of students in New York City, sorry to keep talking about New York City, but the number of students in the New York City school system has dropped by 12% since the COVID era, 12%. Yet they keep building more school buildings and the teachers keep making more and more money.
well, well, there's certainly the issue over charter schools and privatizing schools is front and center nationwide. The Department of Education under Betsy DeVos tried to make some headway, um, but had very limited success.
Oh, right now, didn't our current president dissolve the Department of Education?
Well, he wrote an executive order,
Yeah, which is
and
gonna, that's,
and
keep
then
keep
he's been
going.
sued, and I suspect, among others, been sued by the labor union who represents
Oh,
the
yeah.
the government employees employed by the Department of Education. This isn't necessarily all of the teachers around the country, but only the bureaucrats
Oh,
within.
the administration members. Oh, I
Yeah.
taught at FIT, State University of New York School, and the administration employees, the administrators, were members of the same teachers union as the teachers. So it's all,
I just saw this morning, and I it brought a smile to my face, but I didn't read the whole article. But there was a headline that at some institute of higher education,
to be
some
named
stu-
later.
students, and I don't remember the name of it, the students have submitted a Doge-like petition demanding that
Huh.
4,000 administrators explain their jobs.
Cool.
I think that's
Oh yeah, yeah. At a school I used to teach to be named later, boy, they sure had some nice administrators' cars in the parking lots. Where yeah, the 70% of the teachers were like myself were adjunct faculty making $3,000 a class, which is like 25,000 a year. We couldn't even afford the cars that the administrators had. Oh, and that's nice to see that the students are active in that as well.
I mean, we may have to follow up, and I can find that. I'll post it to you, and you can edit and post production. But
Uh-oh, that's our editor telling
that's
us,
our
I mean,
editor
our
as well.
director telling us we just have 1 minute left.
Much more to say in 1 minute
Yeah,
only. All I
that's
could,
why we're doing two shows. I remember the last show we did, we ran over and we had to do a show and a half. So this time we had two shows done. That's great. We just have 1 minute left. It's been great to discuss the problem with public sector unions with Ron Litchman, who has a Substack account. Why don't you tell us about your writing? You're an independent
well,
writer.
my Substack you'll find under the libertarian light dot substack.com or com dot substack, but you'll find it one way or the other. I
Do you
titled it
get paid?
editor.
Do you get paid? Does Substack pay you for that?
Well, if
I
enough
just
subscribers volunteer to buy me coffee, I'll get paid.
the same thing with the TV show.
Uh,
Exactly. Once we
So,
get enough subscribers, we're gonna have a party. That's right.
so we can, I sincerely invite all of our viewers. Look me up on Substack. I titled my piece heterodoxies,
Yeah,
that is the opposite of orthodoxies,
right.
and you will find, I hope, contrarian um, advocacy is what I've subtitled it.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what we're doing in this show is kind of the enlightenment. We're skeptical of the state, pretty much. At least I am. Ron, you're a little bit more pro-state when it comes to nationalistic issues, and that's what makes the world go round.
well, I will voice a mild dissent over the description being pro-state, but
No, no, did I call you pro-state? I didn't mean that. Oh, no, you're skeptical of the state.
skeptical. I am quite. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I'm an original uh, skeptic. I'm genetically skeptic. And in the last seconds of our overtime, let me
Right,
just
right.
toss out without discussion, but a an invitation to our viewers to check out Davis Bacon,
Yeah, the Davis-Bacon law.
the Davis Bacon law, and its derivative, its parallel in New York State, costs taxpayers a fortune.
Yeah, yeah, that's a mess. Yeah.
It
Well,
requires, for the sake of unions, maybe mainly a the all municipal construction
yeah,
needs to be paid at union wages. Period.
like the public schools that are
Like
being built. Let
public
me,
highways, everything.
thank you, Ron. Thanks, Ron. Thanks again for the second show. Thank you for watching Hardfire TV. Each of our episodes appears 6 times monthly on the Brooklyn Free Speech Network, available citywide and streaming through the Brick Arts Media House. You can find our schedule at CameronEconomics.com. We have more than 75 programs about classical liberal ideas on YouTube, classical skeptical of the state ideas on YouTube. Just search for Hardfire TV and Brooklyn Free Speech. See you next time.